Welcome back. You're listening to Get Real with Bob and Stacey. Real people, real issues, and real estate. This is our Leaders and Legends segment. Joining us by phone today, special guest Pat McGeehan, CEO of New Jersey-based Forefront Properties, which is a privately held real estate investment company that acquires and renovates underperforming real estate. Welcome to the show, Pat.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Stacey. I'm glad you could take the time to have me on.
So, Pat, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do?
Okay, I've been in real estate for about 25 years. I acquire multifamily residential real estate, mostly in Hoboken, northern New Jersey, near Manhattan, and I rent them out. I sometimes do a lot of renovation work to them. Some need some renovation, but most of the time I try to buy assets that I can reposition and bring up the rent roll.
Okay, and what's your target market as far as rentals?
I like to invest in areas that are like B and A locations where the infrastructure is set up in hub communities, and I like to cater to millennials.
And how do you do that? How do you cater to millennials in this market?
I'd say mostly we try to have most of our units are new and hip and modern. We try to really pay close attention to high amenities, like we expose the brick. We like to use black windows and awnings. We like to use an open floor plan where we can maximize every space while making sure there's ample storage, which is a key to a lot of millennials. We like to also add features like espresso shaker-style cabinets, granite countertops, and stainless steel appliances.
Are the units small because it's typically millennials, like singles?
Yeah, a lot of times in Hoboken, a typical unit is only about 700 square feet. So a lot of times we also try to have a lot of amenities such as internet, video intercom systems, and wireless Wi-Fi.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah.
And how do you finance something like that?
A lot of times I get a lot of the construction comes through one bank. So, for example, if I buy a building, I put 25% down. The bank will give me 75%. This is all based on appraisal. So if the appraisal comes in and it's adequate enough, they'd give me 75% of the purchase. And sometimes, if your credit's good and you have a track record like I do, 25 years experience, they'll also give you 100% of the rehab costs.
So do you have any advice for somebody, for example, a lot of our listeners, Bob and I talk a lot on the show about investing in real estate only because it gives you an opportunity to earn residual income that is not tied to the number of hours you work necessarily. So if you want to have build a retirement, etc., one way to do that is through real estate. Do you have any advice for somebody, like what is the first step somebody should take in potentially buying a multifamily apartment building, especially where you need such a large down payment? Like, what was the first building you bought and how did you do it?
Well, I used to listen to a lot of those tapes, Carlton Sheets, No Money Down.
Yes.
And actually the first property I bought in Hoboken was in 1990, and it was $230,000. And those courses do work. I know it's a little harder now with the demand for real estate, but when you catch a down market, I bought my first building it was a 3-family in Hoboken, for $230,000, of which the bank gave me a 207 first, and I got a second lien from the seller for $23,000.
Wow.
So in essence, I bought the property, no money down, and I only had $30,000 to my name at the time because I was only 25 years old, and I used the $30,000 to renovate the entire building, which was quite the challenge when you think how expensive kitchens are. But I was able to use a lot of my own sweat labor and doing a lot of the renovations.
Yeah, I think definitely for anybody listening, you really have to, especially if you don't have a big down payment, because typically if you're going above 4 units, you're going to definitely need a large down payment.
Yes.
So you really have to dig. Like we talked on here recently about this program in our market where we have a private lender that does 75% financing on after improved value for somebody that wants to not only buy but also rehab. But typically it's probably not going to be like traditional bank financing on doing your first one. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I definitely agree. Yeah, and I think that the more you look out there, sometimes you shouldn't really think about the rate you pay for money, and it's more the availability.
Yes.
'Cause sometimes you have to find, if you find a motivated seller and they want to close quick, it's not really, if you're borrowing the money for 6 or 8 months, sometimes I care, but I don't care what I pay for the rate because it's just the availability of capital.
Yes.
And that comes into play a lot. And, and you just, once you get the asset repositioned, then you can go to a bank, show them the strong rent roll, even if it's a single-family house, and show them the expenses, and then you can lock in, 10-year money at a very attractable rate.
Yes. You talked about how right now a lot of investors are looking for good deals on investment properties. How the heck do you find opportunities when there's a high demand for them?
Well, if I'd say anything, you're going back to your idea about tips, and I wrote down 3 of my most important tips. I just want to go back to that one real quick, but I'd say the biggest thing is to create a game plan. So if you have a 1-year plan, a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan, you have to decide if you want to do this full-time or part-time, single family versus residential, multifamily, or commercial. So there's a lot of questions to ask, but I'd say, I read a quote that was one of my favorite quotes. It says, "A goal without a plan is just a wish." And that was from a French writer. I was trying to pronounce his name, but I don't want to embarrass myself on the air. But that was the crux of it. And also, too, the other 2 tips I would mention is you have to find motivated sellers, because the key to real estate is if a seller's not motivated, you're not likely to get the price that best aligns with your financial goals. And how do you, to answer your question, how do you attract those motivated sellers? You can go to open houses, look for vacant, beat-up houses, look in the newspaper, join a real estate organization, and spread the word what you're looking to try to do. And you also have to look at plenty of properties. I mean, I look at 50 properties for every one that I say yes, and you need to be selective. It's a business decision based on, income and expenses. It's not based on your attraction to the property or how nice it is or how nice the neighborhood is. There's a wide range of options out there. You need to, kind of narrow that down by looking at as many properties as you can.
Do you ever find yourself, only because this has happened, I've flipped some real estate in my day, that, for example, you might get into a bidding war, or you buy at auction, which I've bought a few at auction, and you become psychologically attached to it that you end up bidding too much where you should have just stopped. How do you make sure that you're getting a good deal on these properties?
Yeah, you have to, I went to a lot of these auctions, and you just have to set inside your mind that say, I only want to pay $150,000 for this property. It needs extensive rehab work, and I'm not going to go over that, regardless of what everyone else thinks. I said, I'm seeing that in the market right now with the residential multifamily properties, that guys are paying, X amount over rent for to acquire these assets, but then it acquires 50 to 60% down payment just for the building to break even. So I think the main thing is you have to stick to your guns, and I know it's hard when it was a hot real estate market like it is now, but all markets correct, and they'll come back, and then you have to get. The main thing is just to stick to your guns and stick to your plan. If that means to buying less property, sometimes that's a good thing as well, because a lot of times you pay up on a property, and then you do all the work, and you have all this exposure and risk, and you're lucky if you break even on the flip.
Absolutely.
So I'd say more so than anything, just stick to your guns, and if the other investor wants to pay more, maybe they can do the work cheaper or whatever their formula that they use. But just stick to your guns. Yes.
Now, as far as doing rehab, one of the challenges I had when I was flipping a lot of real estate is finding good contractors that are reliable, that say that they're going to be done in 60 days and they're actually done in 60 days, or they give you a quote and they actually stick to the quote. How do you find good help?
Well, I kind of stay with my same GC that does most of my work, and we have a written contract, which is very important, and we stick by the same game plan all the time. Also, I reward him too, not only if he goes overage, but under. So if we have a 4-month job and he gets it done in 3.5 months, I want him rewarded, because what I'm laying it out just in soft costs with no rents coming in, it costs me a fortune. So the minimum amount I give him is more than worth it. So that's why I have those things set up. And everything's got to be written down. And also, too, in this litigious world that we live in, you also have to have separate addendums signed, hold harmless by every. I don't care if they're working under a GC. Even if if I own the building, if there's a lawsuit or something, you have to make sure that there's a there's a held harmless sign by all contractors, regardless if they were employed by you or not, just as another layer of protection. And I think that helps as well.
That's great ideas. I love the idea of incentivizing your contractor to get the work done early, something that most people wouldn't think of. Definitely, I love the idea of having everybody that's stepping foot into the property doing a hold harmless. What about now you own a bunch of units? First of all, what does a typical day look like for you when you own so many apartment units?
Well, I read a book on managing property, and they all said if you do things that you love, and my love is doing the rehab work and then being in charge of it and finding deals. Like I really enjoy finding a deal, signing the contract. That's the part that I like. I really don't like accounting. I really don't like management. And they said in real estate, if you do things that you don't like, you wind up getting burnt out and not liking what you're doing. So I've come to the point where I give up things. Like I have someone that does my QuickBooks. I have someone that does my management. And the key to management is you have to manage your manager. So you have to be on top of your manager. They have to expect weekly calls. And I deal with them, and they deal with the property, and they deal with, all the rent collection. They deal with any tenant issues or problems. They deal with all that, and I just deal with them on a weekly basis. And if they don't deal with me on a weekly basis, I bring my business somewhere else because I have to know. I have to know on a weekly basis, not every 6 months. I have to know that the buildings are being inspected and that everything's getting done on a weekly basis. And I think that's the key, is managing your manager.
Yeah, really important, especially, I don't know about New Jersey, but I know, for example, in states like Massachusetts, we are a tenant-friendly state when it comes to the laws. And as a landlord, if you do something incorrectly, it could be putting the security deposit in a non-interest-bearing account, like little teeny things. There's specific laws that you have to follow. And if you don't, if something happens where you end up in court, the landlord can end up with triple damages under a lawsuit. So you have to be really careful with stuff like that.
Yep. Yeah, and then it ultimately all falls on the building or homeowner. So that's another reason for the weekly calls that you have to be. You can't just say my management team handles that. In essence, it all falls on you as the owner of the building. So that's why that weekly conversation is you take care of problems before they become real big problems.
I love that you do a lot of research. Are you still reading a lot of books on managing and building a rental portfolio, or do you have any books that you could recommend for others?
Yeah, I'd like to say Robert Kiyosaki is one of my favorite books. He talks all about acquiring assets, repositioning assets, and then moving on and acquiring another asset or business, any kind of income-producing business, be it real estate, franchise, or anything that you can do, and then just keep rolling on. And that's been my key, because I used to buy and flip properties, and then I'd have to pay the government all this money when I did sell. Now I refinance, I get the money tax-free, and now I hold the property for long-term, and that's where real wealth is made in real estate, by buying, acquiring, and holding over the long term.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about the market that you're in now, Hoboken. That's a sub-market of New York City, right?
Yes, it's a mile square, and there's it's right over the water from Manhattan. So there's boats on 14th Street and then lower Hoboken, right by the PATH train, which is an underground subway. I know that you have the T there in Boston, but This is, like I said, it is a sub-market of Manhattan. It's not as the prices aren't as high because you have that little bit of a commute, but it's something a lot of millennials like to live in Hoboken. There's great restaurants, New York City type restaurants up and down Washington Street, as well as along the waterfront. So Hudson Street, and there's some other beautiful streets in Hoboken as well. But it's a great town. It's well run, and it's a great alternative to New York. And 20 years from now, kids will want to live there just like they want to live there now.
And tell us about the prices. You said the prices have been going kind of crazy in New York City and Hoboken.
I heard some parts of Manhattan, in the primary areas have hit 3,000 a square foot. I think Hoboken just hit 900 a square foot, which is very high. But relative to Hoboken, to New York, it's still very attractive, and there's a lot of work going on there in the back streets. When I first started buying in Hoboken, you'd only go 3 blocks off Washington Street, and the other streets were named after presidents like Clinton. Those were all the streets that were further down, and nobody would even invest down there. Now everyone invests. The whole town, you're running out of room, is all going to these back streets, and people don't mind walking. And the other advantage is in Hoboken, you don't need a car because you have mass transit. You have boats and PATH trains and buses that go right through the Lincoln Tunnel to New York City.
And how long does it take?
It's an ideal commute.
How long does it take to get from Hoboken to into the city?
Into the city, if you took a boat, I have a building that's on 11th and Washington. There's a boat on 14th and Hudson, which gets you to Manhattan in 5 minutes.
Wow.
So you can take a boat, walk from my building, and so those rents, those are 650 square foot units, and we're getting like $2,600 a month for those. Then they're brand new, renovated, stackable washer and dryer, exposed brick, and that's a walk up, no parking. But like I said, you don't need a car in Hoboken. That cuts out a big expense right there.
I
and there's also New Jersey Transit leaves from Hoboken and goes all the way down the Jersey Shore, and goes right all the way down to Bay Head, which is far down on the Jersey coast. So it's very accessible.
Do you get people that, for example, work in other states and they spend so much time in New York City that they end up renting, but they're not there all the time?
I don't really see that. We see a lot of a younger generation, like millennials and like upper 20s, that rent for a year or two and stay there, and then they either move on or move out to the suburbs and get a rental there or buy their dream home. But it's weird because there's such low inventory that for example, I have a unit that comes up for rent and it'll rent in an hour. So I never have any kind of someone moves out at midnight and someone's there the next day paying rent, and we never ever have a lost rent. Even when the market when the financial crisis hit, the only thing that changed was the rents were still there. They went down obviously a little bit, not been relative. They were not bad, but the brokers, the landlords were paying the fee for the rentals, whereas the tenant usually pays. That's the only thing that really happened because there's a little more demand of units. But now it's so tight that I think there's only about a 2-month supply of rentals in Hoboken, or a month and a half. It might be as small as that, which is like unheard of.
Wow. Well, that's going to do it for us. We got to take a break, Pat, but we appreciate you joining us on the show today.
Oh, thank you. That was it, huh?
Yeah, it was it. Flew by. So that's going to do it for this edition of Get Real with Bob and Stacey. Make sure you tune in again next weekend for more.